Hello. Probably need to put the music down a little bit. Just let me know. Let me know how that is, if it needs to be softer or whatever. How is everyone? I'm sorry for taking so long. I was busy eating lunch. But I wanted to get up at 2 o'clock. Like, I wanted the stream to be up at 2 o'clock. And it happened. It just took forever to, It sounds as good. Just took forever to eat, because I'm slow. So, oh my goodness, this is so exciting. Yes, Prime Minister of Snooping, she is marvelous, wonderful. I'm so glad to have her back in the stream. Also, I'm sorry if I sound like a frog. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to read. We'll just have to see how it goes. And my hair looks like absolute crap, so I apologize for that too. And I have no makeup on, so that's great. I just wanted to, stream as soon as possible, so. Terry, thank you. You're too kind. Do you like my ketchup thing? I worked really hard on that, okay? Not really, but I was very excited about putting this together. I think it looks fun. And I don't know how the you guys are too sweet. I don't know. I just wanted to put Animal Crossing music on because it's the best. And we're gonna see how long it's gonna last. So, yeah. Everything looks good. Everything should be fine. So, should we get started with this? I'm excited. I forget what it's about, really. But these, for some reason, let's see, what year was this? These, for some reason, are, like, much more risque, I guess, with their subject material. 1989. There we go. So, Shadow of a Doubt, 1989, Case 40. Animal Crossing is grand choice. Nice and relaxing background music for a calm stream. Okay, good. I'm glad you approve. See, approval is important, and I'm glad you approve. Okay. So, thank you guys for being here. I hope you're doing well. Also, if you want to check the currency, I'll just type it in, because I still don't think it... Oh, it fixed it! Finally! Finally it fixed it! That's what my rank is supposed to be. I'm the ballet mistress, really, but... yeah, if you want to check your currency, where you're at on your pirouettes, there you go. That's how you spell it. I love this music. It's so great. Brings back memories. Ooh, we got a trainee. 60 pirouettes. That's still pretty good. I feel like that's pretty good. Okay, 1989, will Nancy be helping in tearing down the Berlin Wall in this book? I don't know, that's a good question. I guess we'll find out. So, it's about her helping Carson. Here, I'll go ahead and read the blurb on the back. So, it says, a deadly case of double jeopardy threatens Nancy and her father. An anonymous letter to lawyer Carson Drew threatens to destroy his career. Nancy's father is accused of obstructing justice at a long-ago trial, which put an innocent man behind bars. But when Nancy tracks down Robert Gleason, the man convicted in the case, she finds herself at the scene of suicide. Gleason has killed himself. There's a lot of like murder and stuff in these, and like, you know, in the games barely anybody gets killed. It's just like lighthearted stuff most of the time, and I just think that's funny. But okay, anyways, Gleason's handsome son Chris asks Nancy to investigate against the wishes of his sister Kate. The clues lead the teen detective into a legal web of greed, deceit, and murder. Suddenly, Nancy finds herself fighting not only for her father, but for her life. Thanks for filling me in, Betty. Hey, did you see? So, everybody knew that, you know, Betty's not a person. I put a little robot next to her name, okay? Why'd they have to say handsome son? You know, 'cause you gotta throw a romantic interest in there somewhere. I mean, I'm sure Ned'll be in here, but in case he's not, I don't know. Ooh, Terry, you're an apprentice. Very good. Okay, alright, so dramatic, much suspense, and without further ado, I'll read the first little page here. Page. From the Nancy Drew files, The Case. New accusations from an old trial changed Nancy's father with doing... Charged Nancy's father with doing something illegal. Hi, Betty Bunhead. Timo. Contact. A mysterious message draws Nancy into a deadly web of lies and larceny. Suspects. Kate and Chris Gleason, the grieving heirs to a bitter trial, share a grudge against Nancy's father. Cheryl Pomeroy, the pretty bookkeeper, may be merging romance and robbery. Edward Vaughn, the lawyer, is bringing charges against Carson Drew on behalf of a dead man. Complications. Nancy's father wants her off the case. Any evidence she finds could be used against him. So, okay. Are we ready for chapter 1? Are we ready? Whoa, guys. Rooftop just went live. Thanks, mobile Twitch. You know, only like 30 minutes late, but gotta give it credit, right? Okay, here goes. We'll see how long I can last in reading. I don't know how much I'm gonna get done, but these books are so short that I figured it would be a good, like, first read stream for me to do a short book. So, anyways, okay, chapter 1. Nancy Drew heard a click and then the long buzz of a dial tone. "Who is that, Nan?" her friend George Fane asked, curious. The girls were in Nancy's bedroom, getting ready to go out to dinner with Nancy's father, Carson Drew. George's cousin, Bess Marvin, was putting a last coat of marvelous red polish on her fingernails. "Who did you say it was?" Bess asked without looking up. Nancy shrugged and put the phone back on the hook. "Wrong number, I guess. Whoever it was hung up, anyway." "Well, if it was Ned, he'll call back. He wouldn't hang up on purpose," Beth said comfortingly. Ned Nickerson, see, I told you Ned was going to be in here. Page 2, he's in here. Ned Nickerson was Nancy's steady boyfriend, but she didn't get many chances to see him because he was away at school at Emerson College. Hearing Ned's name made Nancy think about his warm brown eyes and good looks. A slow smile spread across her face as she imagined as she imagined herself in his arms. Then a long sigh from Bess brought Nancy back to earth. "Whatever you wear looks great on you," Bess said to her. Nancy was wearing a hip-length slate blue cashmere sweater over black satin pants. "Bess, you're terrific for my ego," Nancy replied, smiling and pushing her reddish blonde hair back from her face. One quick glance in the mirror told her that the sweater had been a good choice. It complemented the graceful curves of her slim figure and brought out the blue in her eyes. Thank you for that. Host? I don't know why it's doing the hearts. That's so weird. Okay, anyways, thank you for the host. "Why on earth did I buy this dress?" Bess asked, slipping in front of Nancy to look at herself in the mirror. She smoothed the soft gray jersey over her hips. "It doesn't do a thing for me. If only I had lost 5 pounds before tonight." Nancy grinned. With her long blonde curls and bright blue eyes, Bess was a knockout. "You look gorgeous. And anyway, it's only dinner with my father," she told her friend. "Sure, but you never know when you're going to meet a cute waiter," Bess said. Bess's cousin, George Fane, shook her head and rolled her eyes at Nancy. "In her case, it's probably true. She will meet an adorable waiter," she said. George leaned into Nancy's vanity mirror and fluffed out her short brown hair. Okay, Nancy intervened. "Are you two ready? Our reservation's for 8 o'clock. If we don't leave now, we'll be late." Nancy pushed Bess and George out of her bedroom and down the stairs into the living room. "Hannah!" Nancy exclaimed. The Drews' housekeeper, Hannah Groon, had put on a red silk dress and a dash of lipstick. "It's not often that I get to have dinner with a handsome man at River Heights' best French restaurant," Hannah said, smiling at the surprised looks on Nancy, Bess, and George's faces. Nancy was about to tell Hannah how nice she looked when the phone rang. She stepped across the living room to answer it. "Hello?" Instead of a response, Nancy again heard the click of someone hanging up, and then a dial tone. She slowly replaced the phone. "No one there?" George asked. Nancy shook her head. "It's probably nothing." She paused. "I just wonder..." "Wonder what, Nan?" Bess asked. Hannah Groom looked questioningly at Bess and then at Nancy. "It's nothing, Hannah," Nancy confidently told her. "It's just a crank call." Do you say prank or do you say crank? Because in these books, they say crank, but I always said prank. I don't even know what crank is in this context. Hannah shrugged. If you say so, Nancy, but maybe you'd better mention it to your father. It's nothing to worry about, Hannah, Bess said. It happens all the time. About a month ago, my mom was getting them, but in the end... Why don't you tell us in the car on the way to the restaurant? George interrupted. I'd hate to keep Mr. Drew waiting. Nancy smiled. George was better than anyone at distracting Bess and keeping her chatter to a minimum. The three friends and Hannah piled into Nancy's Mustang for the short drive across town to I don't know, this is supposed to be French? Chez Louis? I don't know, I'll say it like that. As she swung around the circular drive that fronted the cozy cottage-style French restaurant, Nancy smiled to herself. Only her dad would think to treat all of them to dinner at one of the best restaurants in River Heights, she thought. She had been there several times before with Ned, holding hands while watching the sunset over the river. Hey, Nancy, wake up! Bess was outside the car, standing beside the driver's window. There's a valet here. Yeah. There's a valet here who's dying to park your Mustang, and I'm starving. Nancy laughed and stepped out of her car. I'm glad to hear it, Bess, because the food at Chez Louis is better than great, she said, following Bess, George, and Hannah inside. There, the maitre d' Antoine was waiting. Bonsoir, ladies. Good evening, Antoine said, greeting them. Bonsoir, Antoine, Nancy answered. He led them across the restaurant to a table where her father was waiting. Carson Drew was River Heights' most distinguished lawyer. Nancy was proud of her tall, handsome father. Are these the 4 lovely women you were expecting? Antoine asked with a twinkle in his eye. And right on time, Carson stood up and gave Nancy a kiss on the forehead. He smiled at Bess and George, then turned to Hannah. You look terrific. Hannah blushed as Antoine held out her chair. Thank you, she said, sitting down and unfolding her napkin. Nancy, Bess, and George took their seats around the circular table as Antoine handed them their menus. I hope you're all in the mood for a good dinner, Carson said, because this is the place for it. While they were reading their menus, deciding what to order, Nancy took in the restaurant's plush surroundings. A pleasant glow of candlelight made the elegant silverware set on starched white tablecloths shine. At the far end of the restaurant, where huge windows overlooked the river, couples carried on hushed conversations over their meals. With a smile, Nancy returned her attention to the menu. Well, I think I know what I want, she said finally. How about you, Bess? Bess gave Nancy a confused look. I'm not sure yet. There's so much to choose from. You said it, George replied, and it all looks good. Look, they've even got frog's legs. Carson laughed. I know they sound strange, but actually they're quite delicious. Nancy half listened as her father told them about a trip to Paris he'd taken a few years earlier and the frog legs he'd eaten there. Nancy's thoughts wandered. She was trying to make some sense of the timing or the frequency of the phone calls she'd been receiving. It was no use, though. She had drawn a blank. Is everything okay, Nancy? Her father asked. I can tell you're still thinking about those phone calls, aren't you? Hannah said pointedly. George and Bess exchanged a look. Let's order, George said. The waiter was standing beside their table now, smiling at them. I'll have the artichoke appetizer and the cassoulet, Nancy told him. Mussels and steak tartar for me, George put in. Bess fumbled. Vichy sauce and an omelet. I don't know. Good choice, Bess, Carson said with a smile. He ordered for both Hannah and himself. We'll have the Caesar salad and steak au poivre, medium rare. How does that sound? Wonderful, Hannah said. I just couldn't decide. The waiter left. Carson turned to Nancy. Now, what's this about phone calls? He asked. I didn't want to bother you, but we've been getting phone calls lately where the caller hangs up as soon as I answer. I got 2 more tonight just before we left the house. Actually, I did take a couple myself, but I didn't realize there were a lot of them, Carson said with a frown. George looked at her friend. The solution is simple, Nan. Go to the police tomorrow and ask them to trace the calls. Then they can stop whoever's behind them. That seems like really drastic to call the police over prank calls. That's a wonderful idea, George, Hannah said. You're right, Hannah, Nancy said, brightening. I'll call Chief McGinnis first thing. I'm glad that's solved, Carson said as the waiter brought over their appetizers. I'm just as concerned as you are, Nancy, but I was looking forward to a night without mystery. He winked at Bess and George. Nancy laughed. You're right, Dad. Now why isn't everybody eating? I don't think I'll be able to eat for days, Bess groaned as she dropped onto the sofa in the Drews' living room. I'm not surprised. You polished off everything, including dessert, George teased. I know, but I'm not going to feel guilty. You only live once, after all. YOLO! Hannah laughed. You tell her, Bess. I think Antoine has a crush on you, Hannah, Carson said with a smile. He doesn't kiss everyone's hand, you know. Those Frenchmen are incredible, George said, giggling. Romance must be their middle name. I can't wait to go back to Paris, Bess began. The doorbell rang, interrupting her. I'll get it, Hannah said, walking to the front door. It's awfully late for anyone to come to visit. A package for Carson Drew, a young blonde-haired guy said after Hannah had opened the door. She looked quizzically at the young man. Thanks, she finally said, and took the envelope. This is strange. A young man just brought this for you, she said, handing the large manila envelope to Carson. Carson took it from her. That is strange, he said. Who would send me something so late at night? After he opened the envelope and took out the contents, Nancy watched as a confused look passed over her father's face. What is it? She asked. I'm not sure. Carson showed the photograph that had been inside to Nancy. It was a shot of a well-dressed man sitting behind a desk. The skyline of River Heights appeared in a window behind him. Nancy looked up at her father, puzzled. What's this all about? She asked. Probably some crank, he answered slowly. Probably some crank, he answered slowly. Nancy took the photograph in her hands to study it more closely. With a shock, she noticed that someone had written in small block letters across the bottom of the picture. You can't pretend anymore, Carson Drew. Soon everyone in River Heights will know you hid the evidence that proved this man's guilt. End of chapter 1. Okay, let me catch up here. It's because you heart that game so much, pretty sure. What? I don't know what I said. So Nancy lives in River Heights? I'm learning. Always prank. Yeah, that's what I thought. Prank. Well, quick research tells me that while used interchangeably, a prank call is usually made by children, whereas crank call is typically used when the joke call being made. Sorry. Is somebody old enough to know better than to be doing that nonsense? Well, all the menu sounds like the Dan Cafe menu. Dan Cafe. Danger by design? Is there a cafe in Dan? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. With that weird guy. I didn't know that. Interesting. That's what seems to be consensus anyhow. They pretty much interchangeable, though prank call is much preferred by most. YOLO, the Nancy Drew gang is so modern. Nancy Drew was ahead of its time. Okay, definition of word crank. Well said. Said in an agreement. Can't be used as a greeting. Hey, what's up? What? I'm pretty sure the definition thing goes to Urban Dictionary. Pretty sure. If that's how I had it set up. Don't mind me. I didn't believe you said it slowly until you said it again slowly. Oh, why do the hearts pop up whenever the host picture is showing? Because you heart the game so much. It's true. It is my favorite game in the world. This is just pitiful. Okay. That went well, I think. Water, though. I don't see the fourth definition of crank. A Jason Statham film. Has been awake since 4 a.m. Central Time. Why? Why, Timo? Why so early? This is so weird to see my face this big, because usually I'm used to seeing like a tiny little picture in the corner, but instead this stream is just like BAM! My whole face right there, real big. And I don't have makeup on. And I don't like looking at myself when I'm talking. And because I have TMJ, I feel like my jaw like moves weird when I talk, so yeah. Work started at 6 a.m. Yuck! That's too early, so I thought I may as well go to pass time before the stream. Well, thank you for being here, Timo. I hope you can get some rest soon. Okay. Alright, here is chapter 2. Gotta see who the crank caller is. Questions tumbled through Nancy's head. Why would anyone accuse her father of such a thing? Who was the man in the photograph? Did her father know him? Judging from the look on her father's face, Nancy could tell he was taking the threat seriously. What does all this mean? She asked, finally, her voice calm and businesslike. Before her father could answer, Bess, George, and Hannah had joined them, and they were looking at the photograph now. This is crazy, Bess blurted out. Who would accuse you of hiding evidence? She asked. Who is this guy anyway? George asked. Hold on, everyone, Carson said, raising a hand. One at a time, please. Carson sighed, then took another look at the photograph. That man is Dennis Allard. Allard? Dennis Allard. I like that better. And now he's employed as a banker at River Heights Bank and Trust. 8 years ago, he was accused of embezzlement. I defended him, and he was found innocent. Whoever sent this photograph doesn't think he was innocent, Nancy pointed out. Carson had turned and was staring out the large window that faced the street. After a minute, he continued to speak. This sort of thing happens all the time, he said, but usually it's judges who get harassed. I can't remember the last time I heard of a lawyer having this kind of problem. His voice trailed off as he stood there, his back to the room, his eyes fixed and staring. Nancy knew there was more to this threat than her father was letting on. Someone was making a serious accusation against him, and she would have to find out who and why. Why don't you tell us about the case? She asked gently, leading him back to the sofa. Maybe with the 5 of us, we can come up with some idea of who's behind this. Hannah came back into the living room, carrying a fresh pot of tea and sodas for the girls. It looks like it's going to be a long night, she explained. How's that an explanation? It's just a statement. Sorry, one moment, please. Okay. Thanks, Hannah, Carson said, and indicated that everyone should sit. He cleared his throat and began. 8 years ago, Dennis Allard was accused of embezzling a huge amount of money from the clients of a large law firm here in River Heights. But he was innocent, George said. As far as I was concerned, he was, Carson told her. How was he supposedly embezzling? Nancy asked. She had to have all the details. It was pretty uncomplicated, actually, Nancy. Carson paused. The law firm where Allard worked, Mobley and Meyerson, got complaints from some very important clients that they were being overcharged. When the firm investigated, they found out that someone in the accounting department had been sending out phony bills. The firm didn't know that had been going on. Wait, the firm didn't know that had been going on? How could that happen? Nancy asked. Good question. Carson poured himself a mug of tea, stood up, and began pacing the living room. He held the mug in 2 hands. That was exactly what I asked. How could anyone embezzle from the clients of the law firm without the firm knowing what was going on? It must have taken a lot of nerve to do that, Bess said. To try to embezzle under the noses of a group of lawyers would be impossible. Carson sat down and loosened his tie. He continued. Dennis Allard worked in the firm's accounting department. His assistant was a man named Robert Gleason. When the firm discovered that their clients were being overbilled, they knew the embezzlers had to be in the accounting department. Dennis Allard, Nancy said simply. Allard, yes, and Gleason too, Carson said. The firm prosecuted both Allard and Gleason. I defended Allard. An attorney named Edward Vaughn defended Gleason. Allard was acquitted, but Gleason was found guilty. Allard? I don't know how you say that. Anyways, someone is obviously still bitter about it, Hannah said, but everyone deserves a fair trial, and that's what you did for this man. She pointed at the photograph that was lying on the coffee table. That's what's important. Thank you, Hannah, Carson said, smiling, but someone seems to think I did something illegal. And we're gonna find out who it is, Nancy said firmly. She tried to get them back on track. What kind of evidence turned up at Allard's trial? She asked. Nothing substantial, Carson answered. That's why he was acquitted. In fact, as the evidence was shown, I became more and more convinced that Allard had to be innocent. There wasn't anything concrete to make me think he was guilty. But that wasn't true about Gleason? I mean, all the evidence must have pointed to him, right? Nancy concluded. Carson smiled at his daughter. Absolutely, he said. Why? Nancy asked. George was leaning forward in her chair now. From the looks on their faces, Nancy knew that George and Bess felt a case brewing. The prosecution found a document on the firm's computer system. Blowing my nose behind the book. Okay. The prosecution found a document on the firm's computer system. Obviously, Gleason assumed no one would find it. The file showed how money was taken in from the firm's clients. But how can that one file prove who did it? Bess asked. Good point. It can't, except that only Gleason had access to that program, Carson said. Therefore, he had to be involved. Nancy bit on her lower lip, thinking, what exactly was in that program, Dad? She asked finally. What I'd call concrete proof. It showed how, when, and in what amounts Gleason had taken the money. This is all so confusing, Hannah said. I just don't understand computers. How could Gleason use this program without other people knowing it was there? Easy. If someone isn't looking for a program, the odds are that it could go unnoticed for a long time, Carson said. Maybe if he explained the details, we'd understand this better, Nancy said. Carson sighed. My nose won't stop running. Ow. Sorry. After all these years, I'm not sure I can piece it together, but I'll try. He paused. Basically, Gleason set up a fake billing system. He took a client's bill and padded it with expenses that he added to the original amount on the bill. Then he'd send the revised bill to a client. And when the check came back? Bess asked. The system wouldn't work with actual checks. It depends on the direct transfer of money from one bank to another. There is no way he could cash a check made out to his firm. Therefore, the firm's clients transferred money from their accounts to the firm's. Any money over the amount shown on the bill would be transferred to an account Gleason had set up, Carson explained. Bess's mouth fell open. That's incredibly sneaky, and pretty clever, too, she added. There was something her father had said that didn't make sense to Nancy. How did Gleason manage to do this without Allard's knowing? She asked. Good question, Carson said. At first, he didn't do it with every client or in large amounts, but over the course of a year, he managed to collect quite a bit of money. But then he got greedy, and that was why he was caught. What about the money, Mr. Drew? George asked. Never found. We did find the bank it had been transferred to, but it was withdrawn from that account the day before the indictments were handed down. Gleason's signature was on the check. What? Nancy blinked. It was never found? No sign that Gleason had spent any of it? They couldn't trace it to any bank account? Carson shook his head. During the investigation, the district attorney tried to find the money, but it simply disappeared. He paused. But that's not all. What do you mean? Nancy asked. There was a strange twist to the case, Carson began. What? George asked. Bess and Hannah looked on expectantly. The twist was that if Gleason had told the DA where the money was, he could have received a suspended sentence, Carson said. But he didn't, Nancy mused. Why not? Nancy's father leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees. Because he insisted right up to the end that he was innocent and that he'd been framed. Carson looked across at Nancy and waited for this last piece of news to sink in. Nancy knew why her father had waited to tell them the most important aspect of the case. If Gleason was truly innocent, Allard might be guilty, and whoever was harassing her father could be thinking the same thing. Carson continued. The district attorney tried to get Gleason to tell him where the money was, but Gleason said he didn't have a clue. And what do you think? Nancy wasn't going to let her father stop now. I'm not sure, Nancy, Carson said, rising. But one thing I do know, it's getting late, and Bess and George ought to be heading home before their parents start to worry. Bess took her cue. You're right, Mr. Drew. Let's get going, George. Bess and George went into the hallway to get their coats. After thanking Carson for dinner again, George took Nancy aside in the hallway. Is your dad going to be okay? She asked. I'm a little worried about him. Nancy gave George a hug, then stood back and faced the cousins. I know, guys, so am I, but between us, we're going to get to the bottom of this, she said with conviction. The phone rang, making them all jump. Nancy reached out to grab it before Hannah or her dad could pick it up. Drew residence, she said into the receiver. A sinister voice spoke slowly on the other end. Carson Drew defended a guilty man and got him off. I know why, and how. Now it's time for him to pay for his mistake. End of chapter 2. Everyone is sick. I'm healthy though. Hi, Nicole. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you're healthy. That's great. Yeah, everyone really is sick. Hey, Angel. Glad to see you. Good. I'm glad you're healthy too, Terry. We need a crank call counter for this book. That's a great idea. Oh my god. Can I set that up? I know there's like a death counter on here. I think. Counter. Command. Oh, I'm totally doing it. You guys have to keep me on track though. Crank. I'm just gonna do crank. Crank calls. Start amount 0. Okay, we'll see if it works, I guess. I don't know how to add anything. Okay, how do you add? Okay. So, my mods, Terry, you're here. Will you watch that for me? And I guess you just add by doing, exclamation point crank and then add the number. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That would help me out a lot. The problem is, I don't know where we are already in terms of crank. Here. It's gotta be like 5 or something. I'm just gonna scan. They had 2 before they left for the restaurant, right? Well, I can think of at least 3. I would just say, let's add it anytime we hear the word crank. Right? Or should we actually count the calls? What do you guys want to do? It was a great idea, Sarah. I'll just go with whatever number you guys think. This is a weird song. Wait, it's set? No, just... I don't actually know how this works. I just set it up. I don't know how you actually add the number. I don't know. I don't know what the command would be. Mod wall. I don't know. Anyways, I mean, you can just set what the number is. So it's 3 right now. So just type in the number that, so next time it'll be 4, obviously. So yeah, that's weird. I don't know. I'll look at it for next time and see what the deal is. That's weird. The start amount went up to 3. I don't know, guys. Anyways. I think Twitch is cranking you. I think it's Streamlabs, because I don't know how this works. Because I'm just guessing. I'm totally just guessing. I'm gonna have to change the music over too. Okay. Alright, anyways. Just keep track of that. We're on chapter 3. So, here goes. In only a second, Nancy had pulled herself together. Now wasn't the time to lose her cool, she thought. Not when she had the caller on the phone. What do you mean, you know why? She asked, keeping her voice steady. He's going to pay, the voice repeated. You tell him. Carson Drew must have known what was happening, because before Nancy could hear what the caller had to say, her father had pulled the phone from her hand. Listen, he told the caller. If you have something to say, tell me. Otherwise, I'm going to start tracing these calls and have you arrested for harassment. He slammed the phone down into its cradle. Remember cord phones, guys? Wired phones. We should have let him talk, Dad. We might... Nancy began. Carson interrupted her. Hold on, he said, facing George, Bess, Nancy, and Hannah, who were standing in a semicircle by the phone. This isn't anything for you to worry about. You have to let me take care of this. That includes you, Nancy. Nancy lowered her eyes and stared at a corner of the rug. When her father sounded that serious, she knew that she had to pay attention. But, Mr. Drew, George said, Nancy could help you find out who's behind this. George, I understand why you're concerned, but chances are that if we don't take these people seriously, they'll go away. Oh, okay. That doesn't make sense. But chances are that if we don't take these people seriously, they'll go away. Now you should be heading home, don't you agree? Nancy, Bess, and George exchanged a quick look. Carson Drew obviously didn't want them getting involved. The two girls put on their coats and said goodnight. After her friends had left and Hannah had gone off to bed, Nancy tried asking her father one last question. There's one thing that still bothers me. Why do you think the money wasn't found? I don't know, Carson said with a sigh. Probably because Gleason had hidden it well. Maybe in a Swiss bank account. But what good would it do him in jail? He wouldn't be in jail forever, Carson explained. He stole quite a bit of money, but his sentence wasn't long. 5 to 15 years. He's probably out on parole by now. Gleason would be able to use the money when he got out of prison, Nancy realized. Then another thought occurred to her. Do you think there's any chance at all that Allard was guilty? It's possible, Nancy, Carson said. A deep frown cut across his head. But I honestly never found any evidence that he was. And if I had, I certainly wouldn't have suppressed it. Nancy's father stood up and stretched. Now, I think you should go to bed. It's been a long day. And Nancy? Yes, she asked. Don't even think that this may be a case for you to solve, okay? He said pointedly. In my experience, it's always better to ignore this sort of thing. Seems like a pretty serious threat to just ignore. Nancy kissed her father on the cheek. I hope you're right, Dad. Good night. But as she went upstairs to bed, Nancy resolved that this was one case she wasn't going to turn down, no matter what her father said. Ooh. Pretty sure the music's gonna run out, and I don't want you guys to have to listen to ads. Okay. Once her father had left the house the next morning, Nancy got to work. She had a lot to do. After dressing in jeans, a peach cotton sweater, and sneakers, she called Chief McGinnis at the River Heights Police Department. Her plan was to find out where Robert Gleason was and then go on from there. There were a few people who could know enough about the trial to make the kind of threats her father had gotten. Still, Robert Gleason was as good a person to start with as any. What can I help you with, Nancy? The chief's voice came on the line after Nancy had been on hold for a short time. I need some information about a former client of my father's. What do you need to know? McGinnis asked. I need his address. My father thinks he's been released on parole and wants to make sure he's got a job and all. Dad's busy, so I told him I'd help him out. Silly ad.
Good? There you go.
Yeah, you didn't hear that. We're just gonna pretend like you didn't hear that. There was no ad involved there. Okay. Well, it's a little unusual. Chief paused, then asked, What's the name? Gleason. Robert Gleason. Nancy waited. Hold on a second. I'm looking it up on the computer. Pretty sure you can't get away with this now because of HIPAA and everything. Privacy laws. Here we are, Robert Gleason. Yep, he was released 3 weeks ago. Or is it public information if it's, like, a criminal? I don't know. His parole officer lists his address as 1476 East Main, apartment 5A. Nancy recognized the address as being in one of River Heights' more run-down neighborhoods. Gleason probably wasn't doing too well. Well, yeah, he just got out of jail. Unless he had that money. Thanks, Chief, Nancy said, getting ready to hang up. Nancy, wait a minute. I think I ought to give you a word of warning. If you just happen to be on a case and don't want to tell me because you think I might interfere, you'd better come clean. Checking into a guy with a record can be tricky. Honestly, I'm just trying to help my father out, Nancy said. Okay, Nancy, he said. I sure hope I don't find out otherwise. Nancy smiled. She hoped so too. Right, thanks again. She and Chief McGinnis had a lot of respect for each other, but he didn't always appreciate being shown up by an 18-year-old detective. She quickly ran a brush through her hair. Now that she knew where to find him, she didn't want to waste any time tracking down Robert Gleason. She grabbed her jean jacket from the closet. Jean jacket! Snatched her purse from the bureau and headed out the door. Nancy was halfway between her house and Robert Gleason's apartment when something Chief McGinnis had said came back to her. Robert Gleason was released from prison 3 weeks earlier. The phone calls to her house had started about 2 weeks ago. If the two events were coincidental, it was uncanny. As she turned out East Main, when did she get in her car? As she turned down East Main, Nancy decided that Robert Gleason had the most to gain by accusing Carson Drew of withholding evidence. There was a good chance that once he was out of jail, Gleason might try to prove he was innocent. There had to be a connection between his release and the phone calls, Nancy thought, as she looked for a parking place near 1476 East Main Street. She slammed on her brakes as she approached the building. 4 police cars and an ambulance were parked right in front of it. Police officers were milling around on the sidewalk in front of the building. As Nancy watched, the rear doors of the ambulance were yanked shut, and the van pulled away from the curb and roared off, siren blaring. Nancy walked over the nearest police car and approached a detective whose badge read Ryan. "What happened here?" she asked. "Some kind of accident?" Detective Ryan looked Nancy up and down. "Not exactly. Some poor guy jumped or fell from his apartment. It looks like it probably was a suicide." He shook his head slowly. "Sad, really." A feeling of dread washed over Nancy. "Who was it?" she asked. "Do you know his name?" Detective Ryan glanced at Nancy with a confused expression. "You seem pretty curious about all this. Unfortunately, I have a lot to do here. You'll probably read about it in the paper." He turned and started to walk away. Nancy followed him. "Please, I've got to know his name," she begged breathlessly. "Please, I've got to know his name." Is that breathlessly? I don't know. "Okay," Detective Ryan said finally, "since it's so important to you." His name was Gleason. Robert Gleason. It totally has to be Urban Dictionary. That's why the definitions are so weird. Did it say Carson sassily snapped? If not, they missed out. Yeah, I didn't say that. Hanging up on a corded phone was much more satisfying than hanging up on a cell phone. I agree. I was watching a clip from the past 7 days, and terror hosts didn't have hearts. That's so weird. I did not put that in there. I mean, I'll go back and look at my settings, but I swear I don't have hearts on mine. So I don't know how that's happening. I like this song. It's true, you can slam the phone down on those, but now if you slam the phone, you're like, well, that was $600 I just blew. Yeah. Nancy immediately thought this was a case for her to solve. This is the one case she wasn't going to turn down. Wait, when has she ever turned down a case before? Exactly. What didn't I hear? Another crank call? Wine Main specifically. Please, I gotta know his name, lest I get the vapors, Nancy said as she fanned herself. Terror host didn't have hearts, probably because she doesn't heart terror. What? No, I do heart terror. That's so weird. Maybe it's for Valentine's Day? Maybe? I don't know. But I figure it's something like you have to do for settings. I don't know. I'll look into it. I'm gonna make a note to look at my settings. Arts on hosts. And then the other thing was the crank counter. My nose is starting to hurt. Okie dokie. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. Here we go. Nancy Drew. What? You guys. The first chapter, or the first sentence of chapter 4 says, Nancy drew in a sharp breath. Period. Literally. Look. Nancy drew in a sharp breath. That's not a sentence. That's a fragment. That is not grammatically correct. That's the downside of these books. They're so, like, hastily done. Yeah, a copy editor fail, right? They want to crank out as quickly as possible, so they, you know. Rooftop, please, like I can read. Sorry, I just assumed. Yeah, it's so weird. Oh, you know what? I just realized. It's probably Nancy Drew in a sharp breath. Like Drew, the verb, but... Why would they write it that way? That's so dumb. That is so dumb. Nancy Drew in a sharp breath. That, you know? Like, oh my god. But her name is Nancy Drew. Why would you write it that way? Whoever wrote this one. Oh my god. Lazy writing. That's terrible. Okay. Nancy Drew in a sharp breath. Oh no, she murmured. It's not possible. Ryan reached out and put a comforting hand on Nancy's arm. Was he a relative of yours? He asked. Oh. No, Nancy answered slowly. No, I didn't know him. She looked beyond the detective to where several police were standing guard outside Gleason's building. Did he leave a note? She found herself asking. Yes, he did, Ryan said. He gave Nancy a curious look. Let me ask you something. If you didn't know him, why are you so interested? Nancy wasn't too keen on explaining what she was doing outside Gleason's building, or why she wanted to know so much about him. I was just really curious, she explained. Ryan continued to look at her carefully. Wait a minute, he said. I thought I recognized you. Now I know why. You're Nancy Drew, the detective, aren't you? Yes, I am, Nancy said. I was driving by, and I suppose you could say my instincts took over. If there's anything I can help with... That's okay, Ryan answered with a smile. I'd be happy for your help if I needed it, but you can leave this one to us. Nancy could tell she wasn't going to get any more information out of Ryan, so she didn't press the point. You guys, after this chapter, I might have to, like, legitimately go blow my nose. She slowly crossed the street and headed back to her car, thinking, now that Robert Gleason was dead, it would be really hard to find out what connection, if any, he had to the harassment of her father. Unless... she could check out his apartment for evidence. The police were probably making a sweep of the place now. Still, there was a good chance she'd find something they'd missed, because they wouldn't be looking for the same things. Several police officers were still standing in front of Gleason's building, talking with Detective Ryan. He put out his arms to usher them toward the door. Now was her chance. Nancy dashed across the street and darted around Gleason's building to the alley that ran behind it. On the back wall of the building, she spied a short flight of steps that led down to a gray metal door with a single grimy window. She could just make out an elevator to the right in the basement. Lights above the elevator showed it was stopped at the 5th floor, Gleason's floor. After trying the door and finding it locked, Nancy darted back up the stairs to look at the building to find another way in. She hadn't brought her lockpick tools with her because she'd only planned on having a chat with Gleason, not on breaking into his building. Nancy, you gotta be prepared. Come on. Looking up, Nancy saw her way in. A fire escape. All she had to do now was jump up, pull the ladder down, and make her way up the metal stairs. Nancy pressed herself against the building and cast a quick glance around the corner to make sure no one was observing her. Then she sprung up and just reached her fingertips around a metal bar. She hung on, and her weight pulled the stairs down to the cement alley. She stole up the rusted fire escape that creaked a whining protest at each of her steps. Within a matter of minutes, Nancy was standing outside the 5th floor window. She peered in and saw 3 police officers standing at the point where the 2 halls met. Gleason's apartment had to be down there. There was no way for her to get inside the apartment while the police were standing guard. Nancy waited, remaining flat against the brick wall and peering in the window regularly to see if the police had gone. Finally, after 20 minutes of waiting, Nancy saw 2 detectives and 4 officers head for the back stairs that were in her view. "It's about time," Nancy whispered to herself. She had begun to think she'd never get inside. After allowing the officers a minute or two to go down the stairs, they didn't bother to wait for the elevator. Nancy pushed up the window and ducked into the hall. She tiptoed quickly down the hall and around the corner to Gleason's apartment. The police had left the door open, and that meant they were coming back. She'd have to work fast. Inside, Nancy found that her suspicions had been right. The whole place was turned upside down, leaving little or no chance of her finding anything. She scanned the threadbare apartment, taking in its few mismatched pieces of furniture and the dirty, stained rug. She stepped into the small kitchen and searched through the cabinets, but found only a box of cereal and 2 packages of spaghetti. Inside the almost bare refrigerator, a cold light glowed on a quart of milk and a can of coffee. "I don't even know what I'd hoped to find," she thought. Still, she forced herself to continue her search. She checked under the sofa cushions, knocked on every wall for a hidden panel, and even looked inside the toilet tank. Nothing. Finally, she moved to the window that faced the street. Gleason's apartment was on a corner. One side looked out over the passageway between the buildings, but the other had a view of the street. She thought she ought to keep an eye on the activities of police while she planned her next move. As Nancy pulled back the frayed curtain, searching for any sign of activity below, something fell on the floor right next to her feet. What in the world? She bent down and picked up a small red notebook. It must have been hidden on the window frame. It was dislodged when she moved the curtain. Flipping the book open, she saw that it was an appointment book, with dates, names, addresses, and phone numbers written on several pages. Before Nancy sat down to look at the book more closely, she glanced down at the street. There were no police officers in sight. That meant that they had re-entered the building, and Nancy had to beat it before she got caught. She slipped the book into her bag. Stealing evidence. Her heart beating double time, Nancy stole to the door and inched it open. Peering down the hall, she saw no one, but she did hear the steady march of feet ascending the stairs. Perhaps 6 or 7 people were closing in on the 5th floor. Easing the door back, she slid out and tore down the hall. Ugh! My nose is dripping. Make it stop. Easing the door back, she slid out and tore down the hall. Head down, she barreled around the corner and pulled up short, right against a blue serge uniform with brass buttons. She was caught. "Hi," she managed to say. "Hi there yourself," the young officer said. "Looks like you put on the brakes just in time." Nancy smiled and said, "Looks like it." She moved slowly toward the elevator and popped in just as the first detective moved through the doorway. As Nancy walked out the front door, her attention was drawn to a loud argument between a lone police officer and a girl and boy. They were standing just to the right of the entrance to Gleason's building. Nancy skipped down the steps and stopped abruptly. She bent down and pretended to retie her left shoelace. She listened as a pretty girl with long auburn hair, just about her age, spoke with the police officer. With the girl was a slightly older boy, also good-looking, dressed in an auto mechanic's uniform that didn't hide the fact that he was in great shape. "I don't believe it," the girl was saying. "It's not possible. He couldn't have. Oh, Chris, why is this happening to us now?" She started to cry, and the boy put his arm around her shoulder and hugged her close. "I think we'd better leave, Kate. You're not in any condition to answer questions," he said firmly. "But I have to make them understand," the girl said tearfully. "I talked to him just a few days ago. He was happier than I can remember him being in a long time." "You don't think your father could have killed himself?" the police officer asked her gently. Nancy stood up and bent down again, pretending her other shoelace needed retying. "These must be Robert Gleason's kids," she thought. "That's exactly what I'm saying," the girl answered. "Do you have any kind of proof?" the officer asked, pulling out his pad and pencil. "What kind of proof can he give that someone didn't kill himself? He was happy, that's all. And I know he wouldn't take his life," Kate answered. "Kate," the boy said, quietly admonishing her, "I think the best thing would be for us to go home and let the police get on with their investigation." As she watched the girl wipe the tears from her eyes, Nancy thought about what she had said. Apparently, Kate Gleason thought her father had been murdered. If she had a reason for thinking so, Nancy wanted to know what it was. Nancy watched as the officer folded his notepad and slipped it into his back pocket. "Let me know if you want to make a statement," he said. Then he walked off a few feet to stand guard at the front entrance. As soon as the boy and Kate moved off, Nancy approached them. "Sorry, but I couldn't help overhearing." Nancy turned to the boy and saw he was really good looking, with clear green eyes and thick, wavy brown hair. "I'm really sorry about what happened," she went on. "But from what I heard you say, you think maybe your father didn't kill himself?" The boy seemed to be ready to answer Nancy, but the girl turned on her. "Even if we thought our father was killed, why should we tell you?" she asked. "Who are you, anyway?" Nancy tried to be as kind as possible. "Actually, I might be able to help you. My name is Nancy Drew, and I'm a private detective." The girl came rushing at Nancy, screaming, "Nancy Drew? As far as I'm concerned, your father is responsible for everything that's happened. Carson Drew has my father's blood on his hands, and he's going to pay." End of chapter 4. Okay, what do we got here? Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I had a cold before, and then, I was okay for, a couple weeks, and it's come back. So, it's stupid, is what it is. But I'm not feeling as bad as I did then. It was really bad before. The air inhaled and exhaled in respiration, often written by uneducated people thinking they are writing breathe when they are really just saying breath. Now, which one of the 47 Carolyn Keens did this? They probably thought they were so punny. The Crank Carolyn. Oh my god, I love it. Carolyn Crank, why do you do this? I mean, I'd always carry a lockpick with me if I often broke into places. Oh, thank you for giving Angel a shout out. And Nicole. Yeah, you guys should go follow them. They're awesome streamers and great friends. I hate how long colds can take to go away. Yeah, I don't understand it. Don't know if PM of snooping streams or not, but I do it anyway. Okay, that answers that. Last playing no game. So I think I'm gonna at least do one more chapter. Terror does stream. Yes. You should go follow him. Here. There you go. He was last playing creative, which I believe was his reading stream as well. He reads. It's very relaxing. He puts on sweet music. And he has an awesome dog named Twix, which I need pictures of in the snow or videos. I swear it wasn't this bad before I started streaming. It got this bad when I started streaming, and now I feel like I'm falling apart on stream, live. You're just seeing me disintegrate. That's the word I was looking for. Okay. After stream, I'll go out with Twix and then send you pics of Twix and Snow! Pics of Twix! Ooh, we should have a channel named Pics of Twix. Yeah. Also, I like how since we created the crank counter, we haven't got another crank call. It's rigged. It's rigged. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. Chapter 5. They're cranking us. Lol, it's like we jinxed ourselves. Yeah. Exactly. That's pretty much what happened. So, okay. Chapter 5. I keep hitting the mic and it's all wobbly. Do, do, do. Do, 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 do. Ow. Yep, my nose is getting dry. Okay, last chapter. Hold it, Kate. The boy moved between Nancy and Kate. Why should I? Kate shouted. What right does she have to be here talking to us? Nancy found herself reeling from what Kate Gleason had said. The girl actually thought her father was to blame for Robert Gleason's death. You should think about what you're doing, the boy told her. Nancy heard the hint of anger in his voice. Don't worry, Chris, Kate said, gritting her teeth. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of hurting her, but she's got a lot of nerve, just the same. The girl's green eyes were half shut with fury. Half shut with fury? How do you do that? I don't understand. This writing! I honestly don't know what you're talking about, Nancy said emphatically. Don't you think you'd better explain what you mean? She asked simply. Kate Gleason had made a heavy accusation against her father, but Nancy knew she wouldn't find out anything if she lost her cool. My sister's pretty upset, Chris Gleason said. He shot Kate a serious look. She doesn't know what she's saying. Thanks a lot, Chris, Kate said sarcastically. You know as well as I do what's been going on. As Nancy watched, Chris responded to his sister's words, only with silence and a sharp look. What is it with these two? Nancy wondered. Chris turned from his sister. By the way, my name's Chris Gleason, the boy said, forcing a smile. And this is my sister, Kate. Chris stuck out his right hand. Nancy shook it and turned to Kate. The girl gave Nancy a scowl and walked away. Chris took Nancy aside. I'm sorry about my sister, he said with a sigh. She's taking this pretty hard. It's perfectly understandable, Nancy said. It's tough losing a parent. Yes, it is. We didn't really know our dad all that well because he was sent away 8 years ago. But our lives have been a little rough, what with the conviction and then my parents' divorce, and now this. He pointed to the police who were streaming out of the building now. They started to pack up and move off. Nancy easily understood why Kate Gleason was so upset. But why, she wondered, was Chris being so nice and direct with her? Maybe the shock of his father's death hadn't sunk in yet, Nancy thought. Kate Gleason came back over to where they were standing. I'm glad to see you're getting along so well, she said, her upper lip curled up in a sneer. I'd hate to have Carson Drew's daughter think we disliked her or anything. Nancy checked her anger. Kate Gleason was being difficult, but she had just had a terrible shock. Nancy knew she had to be understanding. Besides, the Gleason kids were her only connection to Robert Gleason. And she still had a strong suspicion that he was behind that photograph and the phone call. This Animal Crossing song is weird. Ah, my nose hurts. Ow. I'm sorry to subject you to this. Like a read and blow your nose stream. Okay. I don't necessarily want you to like me, Nancy said to Kate, and I'm really sorry about what's happened, but I think I have a right to know why you think my father's directly responsible for all of this. And she added, if you really think your father's death wasn't an accident, I might be able to help. She's right, Kate, Chris said. Kate folded her arms. She wasn't convinced at all. Chris took her aside for a minute. Nancy heard him whispering to Kate and saw Kate looking over at her. Finally, they both came back. Kate's agreed to talk, Chris told Nancy, but only because you offered to help us find out what really happened to my father. You're still going to have to prove to me that your father isn't actually responsible, though, Kate added. Nancy was about to lose her temper. What right did Kate Gleason have to accuse her father of being involved in Robert Gleason's death? But Nancy knew that if she was going to get to the bottom of her father's problem, she'd also have to find a way of getting along with Kate Gleason. I hope that when we finish talking, you'll see you have a reason to trust me, and you'll realize we need to cooperate, Nancy said, drilling in her point. Maybe, Kate said grudgingly. Nancy and Chris and Kate Gleason were sitting around a table at the Pizza Palace. They had almost finished their sodas when Nancy felt the time was right to start talking about Robert Gleason. Why don't you tell me what you know? Nancy said, and took a sip of her soda. What makes you think that your dad didn't kill himself? You put it so gracefully, Kate said in a harsh voice. Besides the fact that he was happier than ever before, nothing. Tears welled up in her eyes. When I last talked to him, he was telling me that he had a big surprise planned for my birthday. Does that sound like a man who's thinking of killing himself? Not exactly, Nancy answered, but, and I hate to say this, a lot can happen. Maybe your dad wasn't adjusting to his new life too well. Nancy, Chris said, there's something Kate isn't telling you. The reason why my dad was in a better mood. Which was? It's kind of hard to talk about because we really don't know enough, Chris paused. It looks like my father had new evidence about the case. Evidence, he said, that would put Dennis Allard away this time. And you think someone may have killed him because of it? Nancy concluded gently. You bet we do, Kate said, banging her fist on the table. But you don't know what the evidence was? Nancy asked. I don't have any idea, Chris said sadly. Kate and I tried to get him to let us help, but he said he had to do it alone. But he told us that Dennis Allard framed him, Kate said, and that your father had helped. He wouldn't let us do anything, so Kate stopped. Nancy got the distinct feeling she was about to say something important, but stopped herself when she realized what she was doing. So you did what, Kate? She asked pointedly. Nothing. Kate shook her head and blinked back the tears that had pooled in her eyes. All I can say is that if it hadn't been for your father, my father would never have had to prove that he was innocent, and he wouldn't be dead right now. Kate broke down. Before Chris could reach out to comfort her, she ran off to the bathroom. Nancy looked at Chris. He was staring not at his sister, but at Nancy. Sorry, he said. She doesn't really mean what she's saying. Do you think my father was responsible? Nancy asked. Chris sighed. I don't know. He studied Nancy's intently. Nancy returned his stare, but couldn't read him. She couldn't understand why he'd be so willing to talk to her if he thought her father had helped frame his dad. Then, as if in answer to her question, Chris started to speak. I think we need to trust each other, he said finally. I want to find out who wanted my father dead, and I think you can help. You're right, Nancy said slowly. I need to clear my father's name, too. Kate Gleason came back to the table. Her eyes were red still, but she had stopped crying. I'd like to go now, she said to her brother, making no move to sit. There's just one more thing I need to ask you, Nancy said. Before you ran off, you were about to tell me something. What was it? She focused on Kate's eyes and wouldn't look away. Nothing, Kate answered, finally breaking the contact. I don't believe you. Nancy paused. She looked across the table at Chris. You two haven't been making phone calls to my house lately, have you? It was only a hunch, but worth a try. Chris shook his head. Nancy looked up at Kate. Kate's eyes grew bright, and she swallowed a few times. Nancy was right. Kate? Chris had seen his sister's reaction. What's all this about? He asked as she sat down beside him. Nancy quickly explained about the phone calls and the photograph. I didn't really think about what I was doing, Kate confessed. I wanted to help my father. I thought maybe I could scare your dad into what? Nancy asked. I don't know. Kate rested her head in her hands, then looked up, brushing away her long auburn hair. I thought that maybe he'd be worried enough to come clean about what he'd done, she said in a rush. Kate, Chris groaned, how could you? You could have gotten into a lot of trouble. Sometimes I wonder about you. Look, Nancy said, I'm not going to pretend I'm happy about what you did, but I'm glad I found out who was doing it. At least now she knew the threats weren't serious. Still, what I don't understand, she began. Then will you help us? Chris interrupted eagerly. Find out who might have killed our father, and why? Nancy sighed. She didn't really trust Chris and Kate Gleason, but they were also too important a link to drop. I'll help, she said finally. For the first time since Nancy had met her, Kate Gleason acted almost kind to her. What's our first step? Chris asked. Nancy thought for a moment. We need to find out what the evidence was that your father had. And it seems to me that the person we have to talk to is Dennis Allard. He knows more about this case than anyone. Allard? Kate exclaimed. He's the one who framed my dad in the first place. Why would he help us? I don't know that Allard was guilty, Nancy said calmly. Assuming he wasn't, he might be able to help us. Chris nodded and silenced Kate with a stare. I think she's right, Kate. Okay, Kate said with a grimace, but I think Nancy should talk to him. I wouldn't trust myself alone with the man. Nancy found herself smiling. That's an excellent idea. I'll try to see him today, and I'll let you know what I find out. The three paid their checks and left the restaurant. Outside, Nancy called information for the address of River Heights Bank and Trust, where her father had mentioned Dennis Allard now worked. Then she made sure she got the Gleason's address and phone number before she headed downtown. Nancy was halfway between the restaurant and the center of River Heights when she noticed that a late-model silver sports car seemed to be following her. Every time she made a turn, the car was right behind her. Whoever was in the car had to have followed her from her house that morning. Or the driver could have seen her at Gleason's apartment building and wondered what she was up to. Either way, she wanted to lose the tail, and fast. Ah! Ugh. After making a couple of quick maneuvers in the light traffic, Nancy checked her rearview mirror again. The silver sports car was gone. She had lost it. One quick glance in her side view mirror told her she had decided too quickly. The car was still tailing her, but was now behind two other cars. Nancy drove for several miles more. The silver car hung back, keeping the two cars between them. Then Nancy saw her chance. She was right by the entrance to the highway that ran along the river. Maybe once she got on the highway and picked up speed, she could lose the car and make a quick exit. Nancy roared up the entrance ramp with the silver car following close behind. She pushed her foot down on the accelerator. Easing ahead of the slower-moving traffic, Nancy kept her eye out for the sports car. It was still there. An exit was coming up in the next quarter mile. Nancy planned her maneuver. An eighth of a mile to go, a 16th. She was almost there. When Nancy was only 25 feet from the exit ramp, the sports car charged forward. The driver had obviously been waiting for the right moment. Now the silver car was within a few feet of Nancy's Mustang. Nancy floored the accelerator, and the sports car matched her speed and then some. The little silver car rammed into Nancy's bumper. She tried to gain control of her car, but the momentum was too much. With one last surge, the sports car slammed into Nancy's car again. The force sent the car and Nancy flying off the road. Okay, that was Chapter 5. Chapter 5. What a cliffhanger. Oh my goodness. But seriously, this writing, I mean, these are like hit and miss, but the writing on this one is pretty bad. Does this writing make your eyes half shut with fury? Yes. Chris's chill reaction is odd. Gotta add him to the suspect list. Paige reads a murder mystery to unfitting music. I approve. Be right back. My grandma is calling. Okay. Make sure it's not a crank call. Yeah, do we have to add that to the crank call list? I don't think it's Chris. I have to trust him with that name. Why? Why, Timo? Smart move, by the way. Streaming and creative page. IRL tends to get more trolly, awful people. Oh, really? I don't know. I didn't know which one. What? What did you say, Timo? What am I using for a bookmark? My notepad of, clues and notes from Cry, which I'll probably play after I take a break. And then I'll get something else. I'm on chapter 6, I know that much. Yeah, I picked creative because I was trying to decide between creative and IRL, and I just went to V's last read stream to see what she had done it under, and she had done creative, so I just did creative. I don't want to forget Nancy Drew in a sharp breath. That was just a link to a clip. Oh. Okay. I don't know if I have a permit command. You can post it in the Discord. Let me see if this works. I don't know if it will. I probably don't have command. Well, if you wanna, yeah, if you wanna whisper it to Terry, he can post it. That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Terry. Okay, so what do you guys think of the book so far? Other than the terrible writing. I mean, the story is interesting enough, I guess, but it feels like really... It feels really 80s. I don't know, it's not like super exciting, but it's not too boring, I don't think. You guys think it's boring? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Terry. Nancy Drew in a sharp breath. I'm glad it took me so long to realize what it was saying, too. One of these days I have to get someone to show me how to Discord. I legit have no idea how to do anything in it. Yeah, it took me a while. I'm still learning it, too. Are you in the Discord? Timo? I thought you were. If not, I can get you the link, or maybe Terry can whisper it to you. It looks really 80s based on that cover. I mean, it's 1989. It's pretty pivotal 80s moment. You're not. Okay, well, I don't know why you're not, because you come to all our streams. You should be in the Discord. Terry, would you mind doing me a favor and sending a private messaging Timo a link to our Nancy Drew fam Discord? I don't think anyone will object to me inviting him. What did I miss? I don't know. Well, we ended, really all you missed was the end of that chapter. Somebody was trailing Nancy and they got in a car wreck and it sent Nancy flying. And that's where we left off. So with a great cliffhanger. People tell me it's just like TeamSpeak Skype, which doesn't help. Yeah, that wouldn't help me either. Oh, I have no powers whatsoever in Indie Fam Discord. I'm a pleb user. Yeah, but you could still get a link. Oh, no you can't. Okay, let me do that. I can do that real quick. Have to go over to my laptop. And Snoop, you should get an invite too. If you're not in there already. Get on Twitch here. Wait. Okay. That should work for you guys. The link does expire though, so you'll need to activate it as soon as... You are on the Discord. Okay. Awesome. I just want to make sure, Sarah. Okay, cool. I feel like Nancy flies out of her car a lot in the Files mysteries. Yeah, she does. Or she gets chased a lot by, like, other sports cars. Has a flip phone. Fake snoopers are alright. Okay, yeah. I just forget to get on. Yeah. And a fancy laptop from 2010. Mine's from 2011, so I feel you. I downloaded the app to my phone once so I could keep up, but I got notifications constantly and didn't know how to change that. Technology challenge over here. I can tell you how to change the notifications. It's not too bad. You can, like, customize what you want to get notifications for and what you don't want. So, yeah. Okay, guys. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna switch over to Cry, but in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some music and take a break so I can legitimately blow my nose and, refill my water and all that fun stuff. So, enjoy the Animal Crossing. And, I'll be right back.